12 people were killed, including one gunman, and more than a dozen others were injured in a shooting in Sydney's iconic Bondi Beach.
A Hong Kong court has found Jimmy Lai guilty of colluding with foreign forces.
Hamas has confirmed the death of one of its top commanders in an Israeli airstrike on a car outside Gaza City. Director and actor Reiner and his wife Michelle were found dead in their Los Angeles home in what police say is being investigated as an apparent homicide.
12 people were killed in a shooting attack in Sydney's famed Bondi Beach on Sunday. One gunman was also killed and another is in critical condition, according to New South Wales police. Eyewitnesses say they saw over a dozen people lying on the ground with pools of blood surrounding them. They also reported seeing dozens of people who had sustained injuries in the attack. Videos circulating on social media showed two gunmen carrying what appear to be sniper rifles, opening fire at the beachgoers from a nearby civilian bridge. A Hanukkah event was taking place at the beach at the time of the attack, but it's not yet clear whether the shooting deliberately targeted the celebrations. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese expressed his condolences to all the victims and urged members of the public to heed police instructions for their safety. Police are asking people to stay sheltered and avoid Bondi Beach until further notice.
A person of interest in connection with a shooting at Brown University in Rhode Island that left 2 people dead on Saturday is in custody, according to officials. 9 other people were also injured when the shooter entered and opened fire in a classroom where a final exam was taking place. At least 1 person remains in critical condition. The suspect could be seen earlier on CCTV footage leaving the engineering building where the attack happened, according to officials. Investigators were still looking in how the shooter managed to get inside the classroom, which requires badge access, according to the local mayor. An official who spoke on the condition of anonymity told media they believe the shooter used a handgun in this attack. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump called the shooting a terrible thing and a shame. Jimmy Lai, a key figure in Hong Kong's pro-democracy protests, could face life imprisonment. A Hong Kong court has found Lai guilty of collusion with foreign forces under the National Security Act. The 78-year-old media magnate, a British citizen and a fierce critique of the Chinese state, played a key role in the pro-democracy protests that rocked Hong Kong in 2019. China responded to months of protests by introducing a national security law, saying it was essential for the city's stability. But critics say the law has suppressed opposition voices and landed many activists in jail. US President Trump has previously vowed to do everything in his power to save Lai, while British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said securing Lai's release was a priority.
If I leave,
Hamas has confirmed the death of one of its top commanders, Raid Saad, in an Israeli airstrike on a car outside Gaza City on Saturday. Hamas chief negotiator Khalil al-Hayya condemned the attack as one of a series of ceasefire violations committed by Israel since it came into effect in October. Israel claimed Saad had been engaged in rebuilding the militant group in violation of the ceasefire, adding that he was killed after an explosive device detonated and wounded 2 soldiers in the territory's south. Israeli airstrikes and shootings in Gaza have killed at least 391 Palestinians since the ceasefire took hold, according to Palestinian health officials. Israel says 3 of its soldiers have been killed since the ceasefire began. As negotiators struggle to agree to terms to move forward with the second phase of the ceasefire deal, Palestinians in Gaza continue to suffer from an ongoing humanitarian crisis. Recent floods brought by Winter Storm Byron show how profoundly the war has damaged the territory, destroying the majority of homes. Most of Gaza's displaced population now lives in overcrowded tent camps, without adequate infrastructure to protect them from flooding. and aid groups say not enough shelter materials are getting into the territory. The Palestinian Civil Defense said it has received more than 2,500 distress calls from people across Gaza whose tents and shelters were damaged by the floods. Director and actor Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle were found dead in their Los Angeles home on Monday, a spokesperson for the family said in a statement. Police said a family member called authorities after finding the bodies of two people in the Reiners' home. They're investigating the incident as an apparent homicide, as investigators believe the Reiners had suffered stab wounds.
So at approximately 3:40 this afternoon, Los Angeles police officers, along with the Los Angeles City Fire Department, responded to the 200 block of Chadbourne Avenue here in the city of Brentwood. Upon arrival, they determined that there were two deceased individuals inside of the residence. The Los Angeles Police Department is now conducting an investigation at this residence here on Chadbourne, and that investigation will continue over the coming days.
Reiner was long one of the most prolific directors in Hollywood, known for classics This Is Spinal Tap, Stand By Me, The Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally, A Few Good Men, Misery, and many other films. Michelle Singer Reiner was an accomplished producer, actor, and photographer and collaborated with Reiner on many of his most famous projects. The two met while he was directing When Harry Met Sally and have 3 children together. Following the announcement of their deaths, tributes immediately began pouring in from celebrities and politicians, including former President Barack Obama, California Governor Gavin Newsom, and actor Christopher Guest, who starred in several of Reiner's films.
11 people were injured, including one child, as Russia carried out daytime airstrikes targeting a residential neighborhood in the southern region of Zaporizhia. Ukraine's State Emergency Service says the strike targeted a residential building, supermarket, retail stores, and civilian vehicles. A police officer and an emergency worker were also injured as a second strike followed the initial just minutes later in what officials say was a double-tap tactic. Elsewhere in Ukraine, the Kremlin launched a separate strike on the northeastern Sumy region, targeting a high-rise residential building. Officials say that strike caused no casualties, but extensive damage was done to the building, particularly in the upper floors. Authorities say first response crews were dispatched to the scene to escort victims, provide assistance, and administer first aid where needed. The attack comes as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky meets with U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner in Berlin as Washington intensifies its efforts to end the war.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and U.S. envoys arrived in Berlin on Sunday for more talks aimed at ending the war in Ukraine. Zelensky voiced readiness to drop his country's bid to join NATO in exchange for Western security guarantees, but rejected the U.S. push for ceding territory to Russia. Zelensky sat down with U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff, Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, as well as German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Zelensky said security guarantees must be legally binding and backed by the U.S. Congress. He said he expected an update after talks between Ukrainian and U.S. military officials in Stuttgart. Putin's foreign affairs advisor Yuri Ushakov warned that the U.S. proposals that took into account Russian demands had been worsened by alterations proposed by Ukraine and its European allies. Talks are expected to continue in the coming hours, with numerous European, EU and NATO leaders due to join. Tens of thousands protested in Budapest on Saturday at the call of Peter Magyar, the opposition leader, after videos emerged about heavy beatings in a state reformatory. The government acknowledges that there are issues but denies responsibility.
A tüntetés kezdete után bő másfél órával a menet vége még mindig a Duna túloldalán volt. A Sándor-palota előtt már ekkor is több ezren gyülekeztek.
Among the participants, we met someone who said he himself was a victim of the Child Protection System's faults.
Itt van a Szöllő utca, ott pont rossz gyerekek voltak, de úgy gondolom, hogy ezt a nevelési stílust és ezt a ezt a bántalmazási stílus, ezt semmelyik gyerek nem érdemli meg, egyik sem.
In his speech, Peter Magyar called for the departure of the government and the head of state and announced that they would reform the child protection system if they won the election.
Turkish archaeologists have uncovered a rare fresco depicting Jesus as the Good Shepherd in a 3rd century tomb near Iznik. The painting shows a youthful, clean-shaven Jesus in Roman toga carrying a goat on his shoulders. Researchers say it's one of the best preserved examples in Anatolia from early Christianity when believers faced persecution. Lead archaeologists called it possibly the only example of its kind in the region.
2025 yılı kazı çalışmalarında Ağustos ayı içerisinde bir hipoje mezara ulaştık. Bu mezarın daha önce ihlal edildiğini keşfettik. Mezar içerisinde yaptığımız ilk incelemelerde de bir İyi Çoban İsa freskiyle karşılaştık. Diğer duvarlarda da yine muhtemelen aristokrat bir aileye ait olduğunu ya da soylu bir aileye ait olduğunu düşündüğümüz kişilere ait betimlerin olduğunu düşünüyoruz. Bu betimler Fayyum portrelerine de çok benziyorlar. Yapılan sahne de simpozyum sahnesi olarak adlandırdığımız ziyafet sahnesi aslında. Bizim için oldukça özel ve Anadolu'daki bu özellikle İyi Çoban betimi üzerinden yorum yapacak olursak Anadolu'daki tek örnek olma ihtimali üzerinde duruyoruz.
The discovery comes from Hisardere village near the site of the Council of Nicaea, where the Nicene Creed was adopted in AD 325. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan presented a tile of the fresco to Pope Leo XIV during his recent visit to Turkey.